So we're going to officially can start the meeting.
Yeah, my camera's black for some reason.
We-
That's fine.
We can
I'll
see
go
your
with that.
name.
Yeah, we have at least that.
Right, okay, so welcome everyone to our December open hours. We're keeping pace with these, even though we didn't actually have an official MonoGame Foundation meeting due to holidays and illnesses, and certain individuals remained forgetting to actually turn up. But things were discussed. There was just no official minutes, but we can get on with discussing everything going with MonoGame and keep things going. So, to sort of headline it before we sort of turn the floor over to our Christmas guests, a quick recap on 2024. Hopefully Dom can help us out with that with his year in review. Our goals for 2025, and then a short run through the active bounties we've got going. These are starting to thin down a bit as we're getting towards the end of the year, but I suspect this will start up again with the next year, with a new set of things to do with what we're trying to achieve. So, Dom, do you want to give us a rundown from your year in review from what we've achieved so far?
Yeah, sure. So, I've just got my headphones wrapped. Okay. Yeah. So, in the last year, we've managed to increase our subscriptions to almost £2,000 a month now. And that's obviously helping with all the things that are to do with running a business like a foundation. We, thanks to Chris, Aries Turtle, we refreshed the MonoGame website with more focus on the creators and their titles. Also, thanks to Simon, we've overhauled the documentation site and increased content. So and then we managed to get release 3.82 supporting .NET 8 out as well. As a lot of you know, we appointed the board. Hopefully, I mean, I could go through all the names, but it's on the website. So pretty much everyone that's here, and people like Dean, Marco, and Thomas as well. So that's essentially the things. We've obviously been involved with bug fixes and enhancements, increased unit test coverage. We've got an upgraded Mac editor with .NET 8 macOS support in the pipeline. So once we finalize release 3.8.3, people with M1 and M2 Apple Silicon will be able to build their stuff on with the content pipeline again. So various things like upgrading our library OpenAL, sorry, should I say. We've added vibration to the native gamepad API, and a few other bits. So in that last year, we've also had various games. I'll go through a quick list of what we have so far. But if you've released a game in the last year and wanted to be added to the year in review blog post, send me a message. So we've got Horticulture by Indirect Games. We've got Breeze and Freeze by MSIE Benman. Sorry, I hope I'm not pronouncing your names wrong. Tic Tac Doe by MSOO. Ninja Cat Remusted by the title. You can guess it's a cat-based game by Pixel Shock. Smack and Snatch by Skylar. Frish Grid by Shameli Orc. Axe Attack by Sirach. Mochi's Escape by Anonymes. Armored Crucible, The Crimson Dunes by Fonty Games. Arid Arnold by Icefish Software. Dungeon Adventure Gang by Dag Team. And last but not least, Cranky Chibi Kuthlu by Little Telic Interactive, which uses flat red ball and gum under the hood, as well as Battle Crypt Bombers by Narfox, which also uses flat red ball and gum under the hood. The blog post has links to all these games if you want to check them out and support the community. And that's a quick overview of the last year. Back to you, Simon.
Great stuff. We're going quick fire on these, so all of that can be found on the MonoGame blog on the main website. Full in-depth review of everything we've gone through. Hopefully everyone's happy with sort of the progress the foundation has made since we've kicked it off. I think we already had one question about where's 3.8.3. I think that's almost ready, isn't it, Dom? We just had a few check things we
Yeah.
have to get done.
Yeah, we just need to confirm that certain libs are being found in the right places, because a few things have moved around. So fingers crossed it's in the next week or two, and we'll tag it and push it out. If anybody wants to test stuff before we release, just in case people catch anything before we do an official 3.83 release, it'll be a 3.82.1700 and something build before we tag it as a 3.83. So again, let me know, and I'll give you instructions on how to install the NuGets locally and give that a test.
Yep, fantastic stuff. Like I say, we're hard at work trying to keep things moving, while also trying to rebuild the back end to make it more performant. But I suppose more on that now. Tom, if I can hand over to you for our goal for 2025 and I guess our migration to native.
Yeah, so that's a big part of our goal for 2025 is a lot of I guess internal work to kind of transition from what we've done in the past, which has been like a lot of C# binding libraries, various C# bindings talking to native code, to a unified binding to our own native code that then talks to native components. At least at the moment, the back end in there for Vulkan is in there. You know, we appreciate anybody putting some more time into testing that stuff. It's not ready to ship yet, but it's usable. Um, Other than that, you know, I'm in the process of getting the DX12 stuff ready. The big change there is that we're sharing that the DX12 implementation is going to be shared between the PC build and the Xbox build. That means that for the most part, the very same code, if not with slight differences, will be in there. It'll be in the public repository with some slight differences kind of patched in the private Xbox repository. Um, you know, so that we have the same code shared on PC and console there, because that's one case where we can do that. That's almost ready. I should be getting a PR up any day now. You know, I'll be working through the holiday on it, and my plan is to get that at the very least merged before the end of the year. Um, and then that'll also upgrade our Xbox implementation to use the native backend as well. It'll be in a little bit better shape because the DirectX code, the DX12 code is a little bit better tested, and we also have an audio backend for DirectX implemented as well. So, or an audio backend for Xbox implemented as well. So that makes that one a little bit more complete. Whereas on PC, we're still kind of figuring out what our audio backend is going to be. That leaves the last thing there is the PlayStation update for PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4, which will continue to support PlayStation 4 for now. But obviously at some point in 2020, late 2025, early 2026, we're probably going to start depreciating PlayStation 4 as PlayStation 5 kind of fully. I mean, at this point, you could start to do that, but we're going to continue to support it for now. So yeah, a big push is those native backends is one of the bigger things for 2025 to basically get everything moved over to there, including, you know, we've discussed at times how we want to upgrade the mobile stuff, but there's a lot of interaction there with the C# side, so that makes it more complicated. It might still be the one that uses a lot of C# back end stuff. We'll see. I'd like to move everything over to native, but we're not totally. At least I'm not totally sure yet if that's going to be possible on the mobile side. But we'd like to try to get there. But yeah, that's one of our bigger pushes is for that. There's also just a general push for improved documentation, improved samples, bigger samples. We'd like to do something bigger with ship game to make it a little bit more exciting and fun. Because it's kind of, a lot of our samples look pretty dated. This is a place where we probably should be reaching out more to the community to bring in some people that are more artistic to help get some of these samples in better shape. That could potentially be another bounty in this next year. But for the most part, it's to move to native, improve samples, and then just kind of make sure that we fill out the rest of the APIs. Like there are some parts of, in particular on the console backends, that are not fully implemented, mostly because games that have used it, most of the games that we've shipped have not used those features. But we're going to make a push in the next year to flesh out the rest of those features on console, even if they're not used, just to have a complete back end on these things. Um, at the time when those backends were built, they were built by me and my team, and they were always built specifically for a particular game we were shipping at the time. So anytime there was a feature that was outside of that, we would skip it because we just don't have time to work on features that are not used by the projects that we were working on. So now we're going to make a bigger push through the foundation to flesh out all those backends so they're fully complete. That includes the video support, that includes, streaming audio, all the elements that we expect. So all the APIs will be in there, the things that typically get skipped, like, volume textures and, things like, I guess volume textures, occlusion queries. Those are the kinds of things that usually end up getting skipped in those because they're not used very frequently. So we're going to fix those things and make sure that they're complete in those backends, so that they're totally 100% available. And it's, if anybody tries to support anything, it'll just work and not be broken. As part of that, it'd be nice to get some better unit testing around some of those features. Because I don't think that we have very strong unit testing around those features, obviously, since they're not necessarily complete. So we'll have to kind of look at those and seeing if we can actually get some unit tests running on console devices, which I'm sure we could. It's just a matter of how do we triggering runs is kind of complicated there. It's not quite as straightforward as what you can do on PC. So yeah, that's going to be the biggest hurdles there is testing to make sure these things all work and stay working and be consistent. Um, After that stuff, there's currently some, as far as the console runtimes and the cross compiling support, which goes through our tool called Brute. We're going to have to maintain Brute for a little bit longer because there's some reasons why we can't fully go to NativeAoT on all platforms. So we're going to be, a little bit through the foundation, a little bit through work that we do on other projects. We're going to be continuing to expand that cross compiler with some more functionality. So it'll still be a viable option on these platforms, but the native AOT is kind of where we're really heading, and we're hoping that eventually that will be our solution everywhere. Um, Other than that, I guess the next big push after that is going to be, well, where does MonoGame go from here? At that point we would have, and I'm hoping that we get to that point sometime, middle to late 2025, that we have complete APIs, everything is implemented, everything is moved over to native that can be. Um, we've fleshed out our unit tests, everything is functional, and at that point, the question is, where do we go next? Um, and that's a bigger discussion. But the next step for MonoGame is obviously moving away from the XNA APIs. How we do that exactly, we don't know. We don't know for sure. It's all speculative. I like to think of it from the perspective of, if the XNA team was working on XNA 5, what would they have done? Kind of thing. Now, it's different than it is now. Now APIs are very different. Needs are different. But what would they have done moving forward to adapt to the GPU APIs and what's there? Um, Obviously, there are some intermediate steps that we can take, before that. Things like getting the full shader pipeline implemented, even though things like geometry shaders are not as prevalent in 2D games, having the support there for it would be a good thing, and extending the effect system to support those kinds of things would be a good thing. And stuff that we can actually move across to any future API as well. So I think that we'll probably try to take some of those intermediate steps. But the overall goal is to eventually get to an API beyond XNA at some point after everything is stable again. And that doesn't mean that the XNA APIs will be available; they'll still be there. You could always use an older version, and you'll always have access to that. And it could be that we can maintain both for a while, but for the most part, I think the future is a slightly different API. That takes the good parts of XNA and keeps those, and improves things that weren't as good or that don't kind of fit how things work in the modern day. I guess that's obviously a lot of 3D stuff, because XNA was really good with 2D. It was okay with 3D. It could be probably better on the 3D side of things. Um, so yeah, I think that's where we're kind of headed over the next year. Um, I guess another thing that came up was, changes to the content pipeline and how we want to handle that moving forward. You know, uh, I think when we first started working on the pipeline, I kind of tried to avoid doing what XNA did, which is making it like a C# project that runs in the content builder, the content building being a C# project that's in your solution, and it would build content and all that. That doesn't necessarily work, because when you build content, you build the game, you usually don't build content, especially on bigger projects. So that never worked. And integration into Visual Studio, especially back then, was complicated. There was a lot of it made it difficult. Visual Studio would change rapidly, and then your API, your implementation for your plugin would be broken. So we decided not to go that way, and we decided for a standalone tool, and that's worked, but it's never been fully successful. So I don't know how much of that we're going to continue to do. If the standalone tool is still going to be there or not. If it's going to be more data file driven, is how the content is how it should work. Maybe more automation, so that it just you give it a folder full of PNGs, it kind of figures out what to do by default, and you don't have to worry about it. Things like that. So that might be kind of where the pipeline goes moving forward. Again, maybe not. We'll see how much of how many steps we take towards that in 2025. But I think that's kind of where we're headed a bit, is to you know step away from having to manually manage your content as much, and let it kind of do the obvious things easily, and make it simple to override those cases, so that the pipeline handling is still there. I mean, content processing is still important. It needs to be in there, but it doesn't. You don't need to manually manage everything by hand all the time. So yeah, I guess there's some. Well, did you want to talk about the 2D and 3D tutorial series stuff?
Just we have some questions before moving on.
Yep.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Lupinel was asking, if moving to native compilation, native AOT, will this mean the porting to consoles is simplified?
Um, yes and no, I guess. Um, the brute cross compiler is complicated, and it can be difficult, and the iteration times can be slow at times, because you're compiling C++ code and there's a lot of it. So, and if your PC isn't well optimized for this kind of stuff, it can be a slow process. So in that regard, it'll be easier. As far as just porting, it's not necessarily easier. I mean, porting is still a thing. There's a reason why there's tons of studios that do porting of games. And people hire studios to port, Unity games and Unreal games. Porting is always a process. It will always be a process. There's a long time ago we had the write once, run everywhere kind of thing, slogan. And I was always dissuading people from saying that, or to stop using that slogan, because it's not true. It's kind of a play on Java's old slogan, which I don't remember now. But it's not true. It's not true for Epic, that has bazillion Fortnite dollars. They still can't make it where you can build a Unreal game one time on PC and it instantly works on console. It just doesn't work. It's because there's a lot of complexities there. A lot of times, to make it work like that, you really have to design from the very beginning, considering console. The times that we ported games that, somebody comes to us to port a game and they're like, oh, we have our game, we want to bring it to console. It's like, great. Does it have gamepad support? No. Well, that's the first problem. You can't automatically fix problems like that. You have to just fix them. The fact that consoles are, even the fastest console is slower than, a mid-range desktop PC as far as CPU time is concerned. Even the GPU is, kind of high, is mid-range compared to, a high-end PC GPU. If your game runs at 60 frames per second, tops out at 60 frames per second on PC, it's still going to run 25 frames per second on a PlayStation 5. Like, it's not fast enough. So there are things like that you have to deal with porting. You have to optimize. You have to do that work. And we're going to try to make things easier by setting, by making the APIs, and this is what XNA helped with it to some regard, by making sure that the APIs provided kind of guide you in the right way so that it can run automatically on a console without you having to get involved. That helps. So yeah, it's the NativeAoT stuff. It will help in the regard that you'll have a complete C# implementation that works consistently between PC and console. So you'll have that, but it still doesn't give you the ability to automatically run on console super easy. I mean, you could probably get it running on consoles fairly quickly, whether it's running properly, meaning that all your features work. You don't have shaders that have weird results. You don't have broken controller support. You don't have saves that don't work. Those are the parts that you still have to work with when you port, or just bad performance. So you'll still have to do work, but it'll be slightly less, and there'll be some things that are better than before.
Yep. Well, fantastic stuff. There's a few other questions that come into chat. If anyone else wants to ask a question, make sure they go into the chat for the Open Hours channel, and we'll get to it towards the end. So back on sort of the update side, so the 2D tutorial is progressing very nicely thanks to Chris Iris Turtle, who basically is publishing in public. So if you got comments or review comments about the 2D tutorial series, so you reach out to him on the chat, and then you'll be able to get the address of where that's being done. Well, I think he keeps posting about it regularly anyway. We're running into a bit of a challenge with the 3D tutorial because the developer we've assigned it to is having some troubles. We're still hoping that they can work through those and get those done, but we'll probably take a review point in the January meeting about whether or not we might reissue the 3D bounty for the 3D tutorial, because there's a few other big tutorials that we want to go once we've got those two basic ones done and get some more advanced tutorials out there and get things working. So we'll check back in the January session to see where we get up to with that, but we're trying to press hard to get these things done. Obviously things happen, people get time taken away and other things like that, but we are hard on these people's backs. Chris, I know you're on the call, to get these things done and published. So we're there working to make sure they get the best quality content on there, to make sure the fact that it meets the expectations of what developers are out there. In fact, on some of the Reddit queries that keep coming up about whether it's Mac access or setup access, we're pointing to Acris's tutorial first and foremost for a lot of the new setups. So the information is there. People are finding it useful. So, and if you've got feedback, make sure you give it back on those PRs as they get in. So as we sort of roll up now on our side, now we're going to hand over to sort of Q&A. One of the first questions that got asked was about the store, and so if you can see from the site now, so there should be hopefully the familiar modern MonoGame website that we've got, and right at the top here we have a store link for those who want to buy merch from MonoGame and support MonoGame through other means. And in here we've actually got a TeePublic site set up with a few other designs where you can get logos, you can get coasters, and get hoodies, and there's loads of different merch there. I think a few of us have already bought the Game One Run t-shirt because it just looks rather cool. We probably need to update our own foundation board members for these calls to get the official merch t-shirts on board. And so if you want to help out the foundation and support some of the great work that we do, by all means jump onto the actual TeePublic site and you can buy all manner of gimmicks and gizmos and t-shirts and coasters and things like that on there. So we like I say, we welcome you to join in that. Let's have a kill this deck now. He says stop and slideshow. There we go. We'll go back to our lovely camera shots. Hey, nice, Tom. That's a great way of fixing your camera.
Yeah.
Good old Mr. Dude is in the stream. So going back through some of the other questions and queries in there. So thanks, Tom, for pumping on the another one. There's another one. I think, Tom, this is more a question for you. So regards to the new native implementations around more modern sort of shader directives and things like that. So what's the sort of roadmap of plans? So with the native capabilities, what kind of additional shader capabilities does that open up? And then from compute shaders and other things like that, what's the plan to support more modern shader language with the pipeline and future games? If you can talk to that.
Yeah, I guess as far as new shade, like the NativeAoT doesn't really change anything on the shader front. That's really doesn't have anything to do with that. But it does. Once we have that out of the way, we can then take a deeper dive into shaders. We've had people that have done really good PRs for adding compute, or I guess there was one, I think, for compute, but there was one for geometry shaders. But really, we need to add the full set of stages, which are more than just those. And we could do that. The problem is always been is that the people that have tried to contribute these things are contributing these things only from PC, and we have to kind of take a whole approach. We can't just hack it in for PC. We really need to take a whole approach that resolves it across the board for all the platforms, which usually means anybody that's working on this kind of has to have some knowledge about the console side of things, which is pretty important to us to maintain console support, not just have features that only work on PC. So that's been always the rub there. But in theory, there's nothing that keeps us from adding support for all the stages. We could do it. We have the bits to do it. Now, some platforms it will not work, because of just limitations of that platform. But for the most part, it should work everywhere, and that's what we're trying to achieve, is to get it to where it kind of the same way as pixel shaders and vertex shaders work for the most part everywhere. And there's some differences sometimes that bite us. Importing shaders, we want to make sure that this works everywhere with all the stages. But it's kind of taking like some cleanup on the internals. Like there's some nastiness around how shader constants work. There's some, I guess XNA really never exposed a way to support multiple constant buffers themselves. They kind of expose it as just parameters, which I think, and we've always treated that at the low level as one constant buffer per stage, but that's not very efficient and good. That needs to be cleaned up. And a lot of this has to then be adapted to the new native backend. So what we want to do is move to the native backend across everything with the current kind of effect system that we have. Then we want to expand the effect system to have these additional stages, and kind of fix the problems around it. Like how the constant buffers work, so that we end up with a complete solution. It would obviously first begin on PC under the new APIs under Vulkan DX12, and then we would adapt those to also be available, those new stages to be available on consoles as well. So it's kind of takes someone that, people contributing that kind of know how it all works. With the native backend, and the fact that DirectX 12 is going to be shared on PC and console, that means implementing it there will automatically have functionality on Xbox. So it kind of immediately gives us that. Vulkan is basically PC only, or desktop only. And then for PlayStation and Switch, we would have to kind of have its own implementation because those are very specific to those platforms. While you can use Vulkan on some of those platforms, it's not as efficient, so we try to avoid that and go to native platforms, native APIs on each of those for graphics. So yeah, I mean, the plan is to implement those things. The first big push is getting the native backend up and running, and then once we have that, we can start doing a project where we add the other stages. Everything that we have at the moment is, well, for the most part, it was kind of set up thinking that eventually we would have other stages. Now that eventually is, like 5 or 6 years ago when we first set that up. But I think that we can definitely expand it to include all of it. So that's the goal. And as part of that, maybe making more of the low level stuff, like the shader API, that's below the effect API, making that more of a public API. But it kind of depends on where we plan to head in the future. So we'll have to see about that. But yeah, that is the plan. We are going to add the other stages. It'll be there. So plan on that. That's something that's big on my list for 2025 is getting that done.
Yes, we've had lots of big discussions about trying to really improve both sample graphical quality and also the framework quality. I mean, to that, there's a question about moving the shaded comp layer. Now, I believe we've had several discussions now about moving from what we're using now to more tools that don't need things like Wine and things like that, so we can actually have Linux-based shaded compilation. But we're still working through the weeds on that because there's so many different moving parts and what's involved there. And having the right libraries, the right tools that are cross-platform. So, I think that's a stay tuned one for. We're hard at work on it. We know we want to get away from Windows only based shader compilation, and anything that's just a single platform based compilation, which is a wholly part of the move to greatly improve the content pipeline. We haven't got Thomas or Harry here to answer the questions on that, but hopefully stay tuned. We may get more information on that if people keep asking questions. We'll keep working hard on those things. There were some questions about compilation to do with requirements. From a point perspective, Tom, and especially on Windows, when we have setup projects that require what was .NET 6 but is now .NET 8, and we're using self-contained publishing, do those things go away, or are we still relying on setup tools for dependencies on platforms?
Like on PC specifically, you mean?
I guess PC and Macs, I suppose, less of an issue, but on PC where you have to include like the .NET 6 runtime or the .NET 8 runtime.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really addressed any of that stuff. I mean, for instance, we used to have installers for installing, MonoGame itself onto your desktop, onto your PC for development purposes. And we moved away from that as that became less interesting to people. So we moved away from that. But as far as like you're shipping your game, what do you need to ship with? Well, it depends on where you're deploying. Like if you're using Steam, the Steam backend, when you go to publish, you can tell it these are the dependencies that I need. And I don't know how secret some of that stuff is. I wonder if we could actually put up a guide for some of that stuff. Obviously Steam is like 90% of the PC, the PC gaming industry is shipping stuff on Steam.
I think Steam and Epic are both the same. You tell them what you need and they handle that for you.
Yeah, I'm not familiar too much with the Epic backend. And I think GOG has some similar stuff, Good Old Games. But Steam is most of it. You kind of tell it, these are the dependencies I have, and it will ensure that those dependencies are installed for you when you ship your game on Steam. Now, if you're shipping it traditionally, like you're making an installer and giving it to people, you have to handle those problems. But for each back end, you'll have certain things you have to provide, right? So if you're using DX12, you have to make sure that they have the latest DX12 runtimes, which I think is automatically updated with Windows, but you might have to check to verify that they support it. If their platform supports it, if they have the right hardware to support it, you have to make sure your .NET runtimes are on there, whatever version you're using and compiling against. You might have some, you'll ship the additional DLLs that are required for it, like things like depending on the audio system you're using, what audio backend you're using on your particular game. So yeah, there'll be things like that that you have to handle if you're building your own installer. But if you're shipping on Steam, which is what most people developing on PC are doing, at least people that are shipping games to sell, they kind of have you just check off what features what uh, what APIs you need or what native install dependencies you have, and it will automatically make sure that those are installed. I'm not familiar with other things like itch.io and stuff like that, where some people can ship PC games there. I think you just provide a zip, so it's kind of up to you to figure that out.
Yeah, it's probably something we'll probably work on a bounty in the new year for setup guides or deployment guides and things like that for different platforms, and just pull information
Right.
from different places. The best guide is create a guide for it. So then people, if you've got a question, throw them at the guide, and we'll probably
Yeah.
call on the
Yeah.
community to help out with that.
Yeah. I mean, that wouldn't hurt for people to kind of understand what's things that are required, so you don't have to rediscover. Oh yeah, you need this, for this to work.
Okay, so next one we got from Square Banana says, what considerations have you had regarding introducing C++ for all native backends when a lot of PR fixes come from game devs who might be C# experienced? I'm going to guess that's an evolving question, isn't it, Tom? Because as we move to the native
Yeah.
backend, there's going to be a lot of transition between the two. And again, I suppose we'll have guides and we'll update our contribution guidelines around contributing to the native backend and what is the
Yeah.
the C# the C++ backend. So
Yeah.
that I think will evolve.
I
We
mean,
don't.
there'll still be. Yeah, we're still going to have a good amount of C# code. There's not going to be like, oh, there's no C# code anymore. There's C# code. There's stuff that the C# side needs to do to provide data to the native backend. And we're hoping the native backend is not going to be a big giant piece of code. We're hoping that it's going to keep fairly stripped down and simple. It should be with those APIs, they should you know get rid of basically they need to massage any data that needs to be passed down to the native side should be massaged by the C# side to provide it in the common format that all the platforms require. Then at the little level, it might do some other work that is very platform specific. For the most part, it should be simple. But yes, because we're moving to use more C++ in that native backend, it is going to mean that some people won't be able to contribute to it. And that's fine. It sucks that we have to split, kind of what people can provide, as far as what people can do PRs because they just don't have that experience. That said, I've never found that, figuring out things like at C++ level, especially bug fixes and things like that, it's not as it's not as difficult. Some people can figure out exactly what that is because there's a lot of similarities in how C++ and C# work as far as just the typical bugs that you have, like things being, bad offsets or bad math, kind of things. C# people can contribute to that and make it work. Um, it's one that gets into tricky, object inheritance and stuff like that, but we don't have a lot of stuff like that in the native backend. It's a lot of just pass in some parameters, do a little math on it, call this native API. It's pretty straightforward C++. Um, so yeah, I mean, I hadn't considered, how it would affect, people contributions, but I think it could also help us with contributions in that, we can have people that can help at that level that don't. I mean, I guess there's a lot of C++ people that could never contribute because understanding the C# side of how to call a native API from C# is a complicated process. The pinvoke system, how that works, how to pass strings down to APIs. Those are all very complex topics themselves. So it kind of cuts both ways, I guess. But yeah, I don't know if it's actually going to affect us. The truth is that we don't get as many PRs as we probably would like as far as getting good contributions from people. Like, I don't think we get as many as we would like over the years. That's a lot of why, we've had to have the foundation jump in and start to push things forward, because the community really didn't jump in there and solve those things for us in a good way. I mean, we've had some good PRs from some devs. We've had to hold back on good PRs because they didn't consider the other platforms, which always sucked. But I think that, how is it going to affect our PRs moving forward? I don't think it'll affect it that much, but it definitely wasn't something that at least I have been thinking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, Dom, go on.
I was going to say Square Bananas has a question about accessibility for MGCB editor. He's saying that the screen reader is very broken in some very small text on some elements.
Yeah.
I ultimately would like to see it rewritten, and that's a nice segue from Tom saying we accept PRs. If anybody maybe wants to use what we have there, so that we obviously don't break functionality, but makes it a more cross-platform, and I was going to suggest maybe using Maui, but I've not used it, so I don't know if that's a good option or not. But something that's more accessibility friendly. So if you have ideas, do let us know, or send us a PR on how to improve it.
Although we do need Thomas here to really explain through that, because potentially how you define content in the project is likely to change with the new content pipeline. So I'm trying to move to a more automated way of identifying content and only having to provide configuration for things that are not the default. It makes no sense to keep adding when there's already other ways of doing that. But again, I guess more details on the future. That we're something we're aware of. People can just edit the MGCP file itself directly, rather than just using the editor, because all the editor is doing is editing that file and putting text in it. So as an alternate to using the editor, you can just use text. But again, even that we feel is a bit overkill, because you're adding stuff that's in your project that's in a folder, and we already do discovery about what's in the folder. So, but we need Thomas there really to talk about what his plans are for that, and we'll probably schedule a session dedicated to that. Go
Right.
on.
Yeah, and that I mean that's what I was hinting about in 2025. Like improvements to the pipeline. One suggestion I think actually came from Harry was to get rid of the editor completely. Like, we don't need it. And I can see his point of view. Like, when I originally started working on that editor, the editor we built it internally for our own purposes, and then eventually we just shared it with the MonoGame team as part of the official editor. And the idea was that you could write plugins for it, and you could have visualizers for different formats and all kinds of things. So you could kind of preview models. That was the big idea behind it. That's why there's an editor at all. Stuff that XNA never really did. But we thought this would be a good thing. Previews, be able to add plugins for editing native formats, so you could have a tile set editor inside of the MGCB editor, and you could then double click a tile set file, and it would open your native embedded editor, or open a third party editor, let you edit it, save it. Just a lot of integration. That was the original idea. That's, I don't know how long that thing's been in there, 10 years or something like that, and no one's taken the initiative to move that forward. It just hasn't happened. So in a lot of ways, it seems like, because of the kinds of devs that we get, it seems like a lot of them build kind of their own tools. A lot of them have used third-party tools. It just never worked out that we got all these features. So I don't know. In that regard, I think it's kind of a failure to continue to have the editor. I don't Obviously things like Unity and Unreal Engine are popular, and people like drag and drop stuff and visual editing and things like that. But I don't know, it seems like we come more from a coding side. So the other suggestion was get rid of the editor, just have a plain text file that defines what it is. And I think that it's even more than just a plain text file, a C# file that defines what content you're building. And it would have things like, hey, include all the content in this folder. And then you can say, actually include all this content except for this, but this file, I want you to process it a different way. Like being able to let the default behavior just kind of work, and then you modify it. That was the idea. I don't know if that's what we're going to end up doing or not, but that was the idea. But speaking back of accessibility, I looked it up just to understand. But yeah, anybody that has accessibility concerns in the MGCB editor will probably know that Unity has basically crap accessibility as well in their editor. I'm not sure about Unreal. I know Unreal supports accessibility. I don't, as a feature for games, but I don't know if it supports it in the editor. I would suspect probably not. It's a hard problem, and it takes some dedicated effort to make those things work. And really, with people that have knowledge of how that stuff works. Like I don't know what needs to happen to make accessibility work, in MGCB. So it's kind of like there has to be somebody that knows what needs to happen there, or can define what needs to happen there to fix these things, and takes the effort to fix them. But yeah, that's the biggest problems there. I'd love to support it. I would love to have a great editor that has all these features. It just hasn't happened. So the question is, do we keep going down that path, or do we do something different?
Great stuff. So we got another question there, Dom?
Sorry, I was scrolling down. I believe we do. Hold on, I'm scrolling back. No.
Here's
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Okay. If you've seen one.
Are there guides with the considerations for writing code in such a way that it makes porting to console easier? I mean, we could, write a guide that kind of gives you some heads up just from our experience on porting games, and like things that you can avoid and do. We can't get into specifics, but we can at least point you in the right direction. So yeah, a guide like that's possible. Simon, if you have some time at some point, they put it on, you pencil it into your schedule to just say like, hey, let's talk about writing a guide like this. We can outline it, the high level stuff, and consider what can we say publicly, what would get people set up. So it's like, hey, if you do these things, it will make your life a lot easier getting to console.
Yeah, I think you made a start on that, Tom, because there's already a console guide. But yeah, we do need to flesh that. We've discussed it a few times on the board meetings. But yeah, we just need to get an action in place to get that actually documented, to get it discussed. Probably something for the January meeting that we'll try and nail through some top points and get that console guide updated with those points.
Oh right, there's that preparing for consoles.
Yeah, the preparing console guide. And I think in fact,
that
I
can
think
definitely
Thomas also highlighted some things as well in the Greedy Kids sample that they provided. There was a lot of considerations about handling console included in that, and so it's basic things of avoid these types, use these types, doing serialization, do it this way, not that way, and yeah, we've probably worked to try and enhance that porting to console guide.
Yeah, I think that that can definitely be fleshed out more with, more information, more pictures. People like pictures. We could technically point specifically to the Greek Kid repo as an example, for some of these things. Like literally link to files there to say like, here's an example of how you would approach these things, stuff like that. So yeah, that can definitely be done.
Yep. Next question up, Square Bananas has got an interesting one about currently bounties running targeted as single dev. Potentially, if you have larger projects, would it would it be better if they worked as a group?
I replied to that just briefly, just off the top of my head. I think one person would need to take lead on a group project, and we then need a list of everyone involved and how to split people being paid. It does get a bit complex, but that would. I mean, I'm not sure how we could.
Well, I think
Any other
historically
way
what
of
we've
doing
done
that?
is, yeah, historically what we've done is like though the likes of Aristotle, Chris, took on the role of managing the API docs update. Now, where that wasn't a paid one, it was a group effort by a lot of people with Chris running point on it. Well, I think our preference in the past has always been to, rather than having one big major mega bounty, we've broken things up, as we've done with like the native update, the content pipeline updates, the different content builders and things like that. We've made a large project smaller, and they're giving the small parts to different people so that we've coordinated what those things are and what they do. But yeah, it's a case by case basis, and we try to work on the best way to manage that so it's the best for everybody going forward. I think would you agree with that, Dom?
Yes, definitely. We'll have to take it on a case by case basis.
Yep. Okay, doke. Right. Someone. Yes,
No, no,
thank you.
está apagado.
Valentine. We
Está
got a nice
apagado.
bounty. Okay, we've got to go through this now. You got me hungry for chocolate now. I do like a bounty.
Yeah, likewise.
Oh, a lot of chat. You're keeping chatter rather than questions here.
There's I think there was one more. I think we can squeeze in.
Yep.
And you just need to scroll back to it though. Hold on. Chat away amongst yourselves.
Someone's got an image here. Okay. I'm gonna accede to Mr. Valentine's request and try and get chat on the stream. Can I get chat in the stream? Can I open the chat? Here we go. So see, we get things like, where is it? There we go. We've got Christmas dude. I'm not sure we got a PR big enough for that one.
Yeah, I think it's just Tom, isn't it?
Tom, were you the original model for the dude?
I guess. I don't know. I needed something. That was all I could think of.
We did love bring back some of the XNA samples of those, and dude is definitely one of those. But it's an interesting note that when it comes to documentation and getting things from the original XNA documentation, or whether it's from, we're in constant communication with Microsoft regarding some of the old XNA material. We walk a very fine line when it comes to licensing. We can only use that content and those materials that we have an agreement with Microsoft that we can use the license for that material. So, for instance, the huge push we had with migrating a lot of the XNA docs, we had approval from Microsoft to be able to publish those, and they gave us the content to do so. But there's certain materials and samples that we haven't got the rights to. It's a constant fight, as it were, trying to get through some of these things. Microsoft are very open, trying to publish things, and yeah, we publish what we can, and we don't publish what we would not be allowed to, hence falling foul of licensing and conflicts and agreements. I suppose there's one other question here, Tom. Progress on the GDKX. So, as I understand, there is an ability to get access to it now, but it's a bit convoluted. But people have been asking about when we can get GDK access for, I guess, for Windows and Xbox, realistically.
Yeah, I guess that some of this is I don't fully understand some of these things. Like I still don't understand what the difference is between just plain DX12 and GDKX. The implementation that we have that I'm working on at the moment is support for DX12 in the native backend on the public Windows, build of MonoGame. So it's DX12. Is that GDKX or GDK? Yes, it is GDK. Does it fall in GDKX? I guess maybe. So GDKX is not a specific API; it's a group of APIs, that they kind of pulled together, saying, "Okay, this is GDKX. It's a little bit of 132. It's a little bit of DX12. It's a little bit of X audio. It's a little bit of this new gamepad API. So we're going to have some of those things in there, and I think that for that reason, I think that uh, it'll be. I guess we could be GDKX. I guess that's not really released publicly, right? Or is it? It's only with
The,
licensed Microsoft devs.
the GDK. Well, this is where it gets confusing. So the GDK is the public GDK, which is available to indie games and for self-publishing. Microsoft do actually have a self-publishing route, and for using that, and they can use that on both Xbox and Windows. And then there is the GDKX, which is a private repo, which gives a few extra APIs and licensable, well, not licensable, but restricted access things, which can only have if you have a title agreement with Xbox to be able to use those. So those are sort of private APIs and give you additional access. So I think the C# DDK, which is public, that's fully compatible with MonoGame as it stands. And we've simply worked with the DX12 updates. I think it adds additional flavor and accessibility of getting those things into the project. As for GDKX, again, that's not something we as MonoGame provide. You get access to that from the ID team, and they give you access to the private repo. But I think the integration we have, Tom, is that all it is we enable access to those APIs which are available in the GDK without conflict. I think it's the safest way to say, is it?
I guess so, yes.
Again, so it's another guide, and I'll probably be tempted to reach out to the Microsoft team to get help with that guide of because they're a big push at the moment to try and get more hands-on documentation out for getting access to all the different platforms, and we as MonoGame want to be able to make sure we're a first-party middle tier, as they refer to it, for getting games out. So we're even in talks to get one of our samples published through the indie platform once we've got the DX12 update. We want to make sure all the ducks are in a row to have that ready to go and published. Well, I think that's also you have got a sort of soft request, haven't you, Tom, to get we have got a PR request out for updating the ship game sample to be more modern or a more advanced 3D sample. I think we'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to spend some time on that. It's just right now my time's all tied up on work projects and a lot of foundation stuff for the console support backends and stuff like that. So, but I'd love to. I mean, I think ship game could be a lot better. I have a love of that game because of way back. I started writing a 3D flying inside of tunnels kind of engine. This is back in like the I guess mid 90s or something like that. And while we were working on that, suddenly this game came out on a BBS at that, not even the internet really, called Descent. And we saw that and we said, oh, that's awesome. And I never finished that game, which was dumb. I could have finished the game we were working on. But after that, I liked that kind of game. We played a ton of it, and then the ship game kind of is kind of a Descent, kind of inspired by Descent. So I really like that that sample exists, and it could be a lot better. So I'd love to see some effort put into making better art for that. I'm not an artist, so I'm not really good at that kind of stuff. But some better art, some better shaders, some better effects that can help. The biggest thing is that it has no real good lighting, and that could be done better, but it's hard to write good lighting that it doesn't involve writing a complete lighting system. It's kind of hard to compete with the lighting that you get out of Unreal Engine by default. So it's kind of either you go all the way or you don't at all. So the question is there a middle ground? And I'm not sure. So I'd love to see some work on that. It's just finding a group of people that have the time to put the artistic effort into doing it.
I'd love to see someone put the effort in to get the racing game sample migrated, but that would be a monumental amount of effort because that sample is very heavy. Not optimized. Anyway, right, we've reached our hour, so we thank everyone for joining us, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, or Happy Holidays and Happy New Year, or Merry New Year, whichever way around. What do you say in the States, America? Tom, do you say Happy Holidays or just Merry New Year.
I'm always cool with happy holidays. That makes it simple.
Oh yes. So I guess jingle bells all the way. However you do things, and we hope you really.
Sure.
Actually, yeah, Scribble. Someone did migrate racing game. Don, was that Was it you or was it Dean?
Yeah,
No,
we did have a version of it a while ago, but it would require quite a bit of work now to get it working again with 3.8. Yep, exactly.
Yep. So
I mean, it sounds like something good for a community project, right? Throw it all into a repo, start working on it.
Have at it, community. Go ahead and make the racing game. If you need the source, we've got it somewhere. In fact, it's probably my XNA Game Studio archive somewhere, I should think.
Yeah, I mean, take it, dust it off, throw it into our sample repo.
Yep. PRs.
It doesn't have to work when you first commit it, right? It could be broken.
Well,
yep.
Building preferably, but yeah, it doesn't have to fully work. Textures. I mean, it's interesting when we first migrated Ship Game, none of the textures worked on that, and we had some community members pop in to help us get the shaders up to date and get them rendering properly, get the textures right. I'm still working on getting another game published for the MonoGame community, which another dev donated to me, and they're happy to help out. We just got a minor regression issue in the content pipeline, which we need to sort out about building sprite sheets. Or I might just sack it off and just convert it so that it's a lot easier. We shall see, but hopefully in the new year, another sample will hit the bay for anyone who's a tower defense enthusiast and want to play around some tower defense stuff. Oh yes, we're over 60 minutes. We're dragging on because it's the holidays. We're giving extra holiday time.
Yeah.
But anyway, trying to draw it to a close desperately. Thanks everyone for returning, and we hope to see you in the new year. Do we have a board? I don't think we're going to the show. Are we having a board meeting in January? Because we'll probably be still hungover from all the Christmas celebrities and all our personal projects. We shall see. We shall announce everyone on the announcement and ping everyone who wants pinging and all such good fun.
It should be about a week after everyone gets back to work. So in theory, we could have one.
Yeah, might be a bit later in January. We shall see. Such fun. So again, and a fourth attempt now. Thanks everyone for joining, and shall catch you on the next session. Goodbye, everyone.
Later, guys. Bye.
Bye all.